Yeah, hi everyone. It's Mike Redding here from Teachers Training and soon to be usingtechnologybetter.com. I'll explain that a little bit later to you. It's great to have you as part of the conversation today. Our conversations are always around this thought that we want technology and pedagogy to collide. And so this is not just about tools and technology, it's really about how do we teach better. And so we're really excited that you're a part of today. You might have noticed that there is a doc that we've created for you that you can write your ideas, your questions, your thoughts into. And so to get that doc, you just need to go to bit.ly and then /UTBS. So UTBS, all lowercase, and then 01, and you'll be able to find that document. So today with me is my co-host, as always, Blake. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Mike. Good, lovely intro there. So we are sort of rebranding this to using technology better, which is really what we're all about here. We want to get the best out of technology, and that's what this podcast is for. And yeah, look. Today, I think we've got this doc going. It'd be good to get some sharing ideas in there as we're talking. Any questions, put in there comments. We can all sort of have a discussion in there, and it gives everyone a bit of a resource. So let's focus on that. But yep, this is the podcast where technology and pedagogy collide. So with us today is Andrew Douch, who is sort of really the master of podcasts, I guess, and all things technology. He's been using it for many years before the term flipped learning was even coined. He was flipping his classroom. So he's going to talk to us a little bit about that. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Mike, or are we right to go?
Oh no, just that there's a hashtag using tech better. So if you want to communicate with us via social media, we'll keep our eye on that as well. So we're going to split our personality across multiple places. So it should be good. So using tech better is a hashtag, and that doc one more time is just bit.ly. And then it's UTBS01. So let's go in. I'm really excited to be able to have a chat with Andrew, and someone I've certainly been watching for a while. I can remember when I was teaching science, probably, maybe 10 years ago, stumbling across your information and in iTunes, and started listening to a couple of your podcasts and sharing them with my students back then. So it'd be great to catch up. We're almost running a bit late today because we're just having such a great chat behind the scenes about all things technology. So Andrew, welcome. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, and it's good to be here. Yeah, it's good. So it was about 10 years ago. It was not quite 9. I think it was 2005 that I first started podcasting. So wow. It's getting close to 10 years ago. It makes you feel old, doesn't it?
Just a little bit. Years ago. What kicked you off into podcasting? Why? I mean, out of all the things that you could have chosen, why did you choose that?
It wasn't really by design. It was just planned. I'd been teaching biology for 15 years or so at that time, and and I guess I was just always looking for ways of helping my students to be more effective to study. And I guess at that point I was still really thinking about in terms of their grades. I guess it was 2005, so I still had that real, as Ken Robinson would say, that real sort of industrial sort of model mentality about education. It was all about getting them through VCE and getting the best results possible. And I'd always done things like, I used to make little flip cards for them with a question on one side and an answer on the other side, and so that they could, when they were sitting at the bus stop or in the car on the way home or something, and they had a few moments, they could just, they're not going to get their textbook out of their bag to study, but they might pull out a little deck of cards out of their pocket and just go through a few. And so I'd experimented with a whole lot of things like that. When I was driving to school, I'd just heard of podcasting. I downloaded This Week in Tech, which is a podcast that's still running now, and with Leo Laporte, and I'd been listening to that driving to school and back, and I've got like a 20-minute drive to school. So 40 minutes a day I'm sitting in my car, just commuting, and I was listening to this podcast and I was thinking, this is fantastic. I'm learning so much about things I don't know about, and it's enjoyable, and it's it's not taking up any of my personal time, and it's not taking up any of my school time. It's all I'm sacrificing is my drive time, which doesn't really, it's not. I don't consider that really precious time. So I was learning in time that didn't really matter to me, and the thought just crossed my mind one day. Wouldn't it be awesome? It'd be awesome if my biology students could could learn from a biology podcast. So really, that's where it started. I went online and started looking for a biology podcast, and there wasn't really one that I could recommend to them. So I thought, oh, see if I can figure out how to make one. So that's really where it began, and then the kids took it from there. Really, it was I gave them a sample podcast and said, what do you reckon? Do you reckon that this would be a good way to study when you're on the bus instead of using the little flip cards or the textbook or whatever? And they came back really excited, saying that this is fantastic because you can. This one kid said that you can't study on the bus because you look like a real nerd, and but you can listen to a podcast and everyone just thinks you're listening to music, and so they leave you alone. So he said this is fantastic. I'm able to study. He had a 1 hour bus ride, but he said I can listen for an hour to a podcast, and it's a good quality hour of study. It's not really costing me anything, and I can do it far more effectively than if I tried to read a book or something like that. So that's really where it started.
It's really opt-in as well. Like you can sort of do it when and however. And I know all of us here, we've all listened to podcasts. I mean, probably everyone watching the show has listened to podcasts. We all love that medium. But it's interesting.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, you can, as you say, with that opt-in thing, like sometimes you don't feel like listening to a particular podcast, do you? Like sometimes, you're in the mood for listening to something light and funny, and other times you feel like really learning something new, and so even as adults, it's the same with TV. Sometimes you're in the mood for Seinfeld, and sometimes you're in the mood for something much more serious and heavy. But at school, we make kids, we just say, well, it's period 5 now, so you're doing biology. This is serious and heavy time, and we assume that the kids are all in the mood for that. With a podcast, they can choose a time that suits them when they feel responsive to it, and I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, I think it is. It's interesting you're talking about flip cards. I mean, they were probably modern technology for 2005, but the iPod, like, I'm interested to know what the technology was then. I mean, obviously we have all this other technology now with Hangouts and screencasting and all this other stuff, but the iPod, I mean, that was the technology in the day. How has that changed now? Like, I'm interested to know what you were doing then and your journey to sort of where you are now and what you found works and, what principles have changed and what's been really successful. That's sort of what I'm interested to know.
I mean, we can do a lot more cool stuff now, obviously, and things are easier. I mean, in 2005, a lot of kids didn't even have the internet at home, and a lot of kids didn't have iPods, so I had to tell them to buy one. I sent a letter home to their parents, actually, and told them, that I wanted their kid to have an iPod. It went down pretty well, actually. I sent the letter, and then I went and told my principal that I'd done it. It's always easy.
Forgiveness. Yeah.
Permission. Yeah. And he was fantastic, and and he could tell it was something that I really thought was something, and so he backed me up 100%. But really,
Great.
Parents accepted it, surprisingly well. There was only one parent who thought that it was a bit much and complained, and that was a parent who was also a teacher at the school, and 6 months later, he was sitting beside me, and I was showing him how to make podcasts because he'd seen how much his kid loved it, and so he started doing it himself for his own classes. So I think it's parents really responded to that pretty well, and in those days, an iPod was a pretty, I mean, nobody else had iPods, except for entertainment. So it was, these days obviously it's a lot easier because I go to schools now where most of the kids have a smartphone or an iPad or something like that, and those devices have all got pod catching apps on them, so you don't even have to, with an iPod you couldn't even stream a podcast directly to the device. You had to download it first on a computer and then plug your iPod in and sync it all across, and so it was a lot more cumbersome. It's so simple now. I mean, once you've set it up and you've got your podcast happening, and the kids have all subscribed to it in something like Downcast or Instacast or even the the podcasts app that's on comes on an iPad or an iPhone. Once they're all subscribed to it, it's seamless then because you create your podcast, you upload it to wherever you host it, and their devices all just download it in the background. So in that respect, things have got much easier.
Yeah, and what's the format of that? Like like, has that sort of changed over the years, or is still the content the same? Like, have you changed the way you're delivering your content because of this? or is really the content the same? It's just the means in which people are getting it has changed.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I diversified over time. So where I started off with just a straight audio podcast, then we got the ability to make enhanced podcasts where you can put pictures and slides and things so that will show on the screen as the podcast continues. And then I started playing with screencasting, of course, and vodcasting and various other things like that. So I guess I diversified in the way because I mean. If I'm going to talk about something that's fairly, you can discuss it and you can describe something in words, then an audio podcast is fantastic for that. But there are some topics that really don't lend themselves to an audio format. I mean, try explaining, I'm a biology teacher, but imagine trying to explain how to solve a genetic pedigree without actually showing a diagram. It's almost impossible to do. So, some topics just lend themselves to one format or another.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm interested in terms of what kept you going. Did you see a great difference in results with your students? Or I don't know, if maybe like me, I get bored a little bit and then move on to the next thing. What's kept you in the game over the long haul?
Look, I mean, it was initially it was results was what that's what I'm a science teacher, so in my hierarchy of loves, at the very top's my wife and kids, and just a little bit lower is graphs. I was working for graphs and trying to get the best results possible, and so I initially saw that, and just watching the kids anecdotally, the kids I'd known since they were in Year 7, I was looking at them and thinking, for this kid, I think this kid's learning better than I would have expected, or I just had this really good feeling that my graphs would be great that year, really. But it was what happened over time, though, was I started to notice that the engagement of the kids was just something I'd never seen before, and so I think that's what really kept me going. To answer your question, is ultimately it was just that I had this community of kids that were going home from school and they were listening to the podcast. In those days we were using MSN, if you remember that. But kids were getting online like at 9, 10 o'clock at night, forming these little study groups on MSN, and they'd be talking about stuff, and I'd get a message to say, can you come into our MSN conversation and answer these questions for us? And I mean, it was just I'd never seen kids so engaged in learning as happened that year. And as I say, I'd love to be able to say that it was all by design, that I'd sat down and thought, hey, we could flip the classroom. But in reality, it started really just as a way of me thinking, how can I get my kids studying more? Yeah. And all the community interaction, and I that started happening, we started saying, well, wouldn't it be great if we had some place online where, instead of using MSN, that's kind of, I suppose it was like the 2005 equivalent of a Google Hangout, really. But we said, let's have some sort of a way that, a discussion board. So we had a very, back in those days, I can't even remember the name of the service that we used, but it was just a very basic discussion board. But the kids just loved it, and they were on there, and there was just, all around the clock, kids asking and answering each other's questions. It was, I'd never seen anything like it before, and that, I think, was what kept me doing it. Was I got to a point after a couple of years where I thought I couldn't go back to teaching the way I did before. It was a whole different thing.
Yeah, right. So last fortnight we had one of the teachers actually at Blake's school who's been playing around with the Khan Academy a little bit and flipping his classroom. How do you see what you're doing is different to maybe what Khan Academy is providing? Do you see, just help teachers understand the differences between the two maybe and some of the reasoning behind it?
Yeah, well, so Sal Khan is, a great advocate of the flipped classroom model, and I think that if he had his way, there would be no teachers, and everybody would just be online watching Khan Academy videos and working their way through the associated materials. I mean, all that stuff's great. I mean, he's a brilliant guy, and some of his explanations I think are fantastic, and certainly the structure of the courses, that's very clever stuff. But it's kind of different because to me, in the way I do things, the teacher is still very much integrated in the whole process, in a much more organic kind of way. And so to me, the podcast is sort of an extension of the classroom as opposed to a replacement for the classroom. So, my sort of thinking is that, the flipped classroom, is great in that it challenges our old way of thinking that what we do is limited by where we are and what time it is and all that sort of thing. And, if nothing else, it says, well, you don't have to be in a classroom now to learn maths or biology or history. There are other options which they weren't there a generation ago. So we have those options, and instead of doing homework at home, now you could be doing that in the classroom instead of listening to a teacher talking, which you can do on your computer. And so I like the fact that it challenges that. But for me, the question is, what's exciting about all of this stuff, really, whether you call it the flipped classroom or whatever you call it, is that teachers now have choices about things that our teachers didn't have choices about. We can choose when we teach, we can choose where we teach, where students learn, we can choose different mediums of communication. We can choose whether our students publish their work or whether they don't, and how they publish it. I mean, none of those choices were available to our teachers. They had to teach in the classroom in 5 50-minute periods. That's the only access they had to students. So they had to use that time because students didn't have access to that's the other thing. Students didn't have access to information then either, other than through the teacher. Whereas now, half the stuff that we used to teach, kids can Google for themselves. So now we've just got a whole lot of choices, available to us, and that's what's really exciting to me is that, and really at the moment, I still go to a lot of schools, and in a lot of schools, teachers are still teaching the way their teachers taught them, and their teachers were teaching the way their teachers taught them, and of course, that style of teaching was designed by teachers who were living under technological constraints that are gone now. And we don't have to do things that way, but we still just tend to do it because that's what our teachers did. And I think it's just exciting to explore possibilities for teaching in different ways, in different places,
and
at different times.
That's the fun with it, and I think that's why this generation of students are really, the education landscape is so different now. And it's this exciting time to be in education, to be around it, and to be looking at these tools and technologies and how we can use them. Because people like yourself are pioneering the way of how the classroom is going to look in the next 5 years. Because I don't think it's going to be the same as what it is now, especially given all this technology. But
yeah,
I'm interested.
I think we've probably seen more change in education in the past 12 months than we probably saw in the decade before that. I mean, teachers are starting to get it. I mean, back in 2006, 2007, I was speaking at conferences and at schools, and and I was telling the stories of what was happening in my classroom, and explaining why we need to question our 20th century sort of paradigms about pedagogy, and teachers they weren't getting it. Sometimes I was met with hostility, but often just blank walls. But now I see teachers are getting it, and I think that's really exciting. All of a sudden, it's like we're starting to see the change, happening in education that we've seen in other industries. I mean, other industries have already embraced technology and allowed that to evolve them. If you look at medicine, or but education, we've been a little bit slow off the mark. But I think it is happening. So you're right. It's an exciting time to be part of it.
It is, and part of that, I think, is also the ease of use. The access anywhere, and it's all very easy to access. And one of the things that I like, especially about Khan Academy, we were looking at it last week, is just how easy it is for teachers to have all these tools and all this data at their fingertips of what their students are doing. And I just sort of wanted to sort of parallel that with doing podcasting and trying to do screencasting and all that sort of stuff. Like, if you're a new teacher to this and this is your first go at it, what do you suggest to them? What's an easy way to get on board? Something that anyone can sort of jump into.
Yeah, sure. I think screencasting is a great place to start, because you can use that for just about to teach just about anything. And the tool that I'm recommending at the moment to everybody pretty much is Screencast-O-Matic, which you can download for free from screencast-o-matic.com, and it's certainly not the best screencasting tool, and it's not the tool even that I use myself. But I think that if you're just beginning, it's dead set easy to use. You basically just say, I want to record this part of my screen. You click record, and and then you click stop when you're finished, and it's all wrapped up for you. They have their own hosting site, so you can just, you click publish it, and it gives you a link that you can give to your students. So it couldn't be easier, but it's also fairly powerful. It'll record your webcam, so students can see your face as well as the screen, which I think is, that just helps to make it a little bit more personal. I always think that, students, they respond better to a video if they can see the person that's speaking to them, especially if it's a person they know from the classroom. So I think that's, for screencasting, that's fantastic. I still think there's a place for audio podcasting, and often audio podcasting is, people see it as, why would you make an audio podcast if you can make a screencast, a video, and put that on YouTube? Surely that would be better. And in fact, I must admit, I started thinking that too, some years ago, and I stopped making podcasts, started making screencasts, and thinking more is better. They can hear me and they can see the screen and me. But some of my students met me in the schoolyard one day when I was on yard duty, and they said, actually, we like your screencasts and everything, but really the podcasts were better, which is interesting. But when you look at it from their perspective, it sort of makes sense, because a screencast, you've got to be looking at the screen. So now it's competing with Angry Birds, and it's competing with Facebook, and it's competing with other YouTube videos and everything else that kids do when they're looking at the screen. You can't be looking at a screencast while you're riding your bike, for example, or while you're washing the dishes or mowing the lawn. But an audio podcast you can listen to at any of those times, when you're on the bus on the way home, or walking, or, so in a lot of ways, I think there's still really a place for an audio podcast, particularly for longer form explanations. My audio podcast would go for an hour, sometimes an hour and a half. You'd never make a video that went that long, because kids wouldn't watch it if it goes for more than 5 or 6 minutes, whereas an audio podcast, you can make it an hour long, and it doesn't really matter, because they can listen for 10 minutes and come back the next day, press play, and it'll pick up right where they left off. So now they have choice of how long they listen for. So for audio podcasting, again, there's lots of really great choices. I don't know if you've seen these things. So I'm quite a fan of these. It's called Easy Speak, and basically have you seen these?
I think I've seen them recently at a conference, actually.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So what I love about it, because it illustrates exactly what you're talking about, that it's become incredibly easy. So basically you turn the microphone on and you record, and it's a nice low gain microphone, so your voice sounds really nice and rich and resonant, where if you record your voice, say, onto a computer, you sound kind of distant and tinny. That's not so great. But once you've finished recording, you pull the back off this thing, and it's got a like a USB plug on the back of it, so you can just stick it into the USB port on your computer. The file is already an MP3, so you can just drag it straight off the microphone and and upload it somewhere. So you don't even need a computer now to make a podcast. I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and really, you can put this on anything. You put this straight into a Google site. You could put this onto like a proper, upload it to iTunes, or you could just email it out to your kids. It's that easy, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And if you want to put it onto iTunes, the service I use is Podomatic, and I've been using Podomatic now for a number of years, and every now and then I look at other services, but I just keep coming back to Podomatic, because it's free for, at least when you're starting, it's free, and then if too many people start downloading your podcast, you have to start paying money for the bandwidth. But really, I think for most teachers, it's going to be free, and they do all the RSS and all that geeky stuff, so that you can get your podcast into the iTunes store without really, you don't have to know anything anymore. Whereas back in 2005, it took me a whole Saturday just to figure out how to create an RSS feed for my podcast so that I could get it in the iTunes store. And now you basically just click a few buttons and it's there. It's so simple.
Absolutely.
When I make my podcasts, I use a desktop microphone, and the one I use, I notice you've got a pretty fancy one there, Mike, but I'm using this. This is the Blue Yeti, which is about $170 or something. It's not outrageously expensive, but I like that because it's got built-in gain control, and it's a decent microphone. It's just a USB interface, so you don't need a separate mixing desk or anything like that. You just plug it straight into the USB port. But I think the sound quality for the price is quite good.
That sounds great. Look, I've put up a couple of those sorry, Mike. I've put up a couple of those apps into the document, and I know a lot of viewers are really keen to ask some questions and got plenty of thoughts going into the document. So maybe, Mike, if you want to start running through those.
Yeah, and we'll put all those, we'll put all our recommendations for microphones and what we use and stuff. We'll just chuck that into the show notes and email it out. So if you haven't registered, just go back to where this is playing in the description. You'll see that there's a registration link, and if you put it in there, that'd be great. And then we'll get an email. And we do, like what Andrew says, obviously this is on video, but we strip the audio out and make it an audio version in iTunes available too, and we give you a transcription. So we try to cover all the bases in terms. Some people like to read, some like to listen, and some like to watch. So here's an interesting question. Someone says in this Google Doc we've got going, I have colleagues who love using Pages. What kind of Google apps might be useful as Pages has been for them? Blake, do you want to answer that, or Andrew, is there something that you want to add around that?
Yeah. I can definitely speak to that. So just speaking about Pages, I mean, obviously Google Docs does, a lot of what Pages does. It probably isn't as interactive and as richly formatted as Pages, but obviously the benefits you're getting with the live collaboration and what we're doing in this document right now is where Google Apps really shines. I think that's really the power of Google Apps, is the collaboration. I mean, the formatting is nice, but really it's all about the content and delivering that content and creating that content in new and interesting ways. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Andrew.
No, look, I couldn't agree more. I mean, Pages is kind of like a cross between a word processor and a page formatting thing. And you can sort of share, you can save it into iCloud and open it on a different device and all that sort of thing. But yeah, a Google Doc is really you wouldn't use it if I was typing up a document for myself for a meeting or something. I wouldn't use Google Docs, but for this, it's perfect, right? Where we can all be adding things to the same document in real time.
Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely.
So Fabi here from Israel is just saying, I teach history with flipped class. Students love it, the parents love it, but the system doesn't. Did you have the same problem? How did you deal with it? I think we've kind of talked a bit around, you kind of just got to make the changes and apologise for them later if you need to, but keep pushing that out. There's a few questions in there around Chromebooks, and they're rolling out Chromebooks around that whole BYOD. Is that a solution? So there's a few questions in there. Blake, I don't know if you've read through some of those.
Yeah.
Some people find it down a bit restrictive, and offline, especially Sheets and so on. That's back on offline mode now. So do you want to maybe just talk to that for a sec?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, there's been a few apps recently that have gone offline on Chromebooks, and actually have a section in the store. If you go to the Chrome Web Store and click on the down the left, there's an offline tab, and that'll just list out any apps that work offline. So, I think there are actually even podcasting apps that will cache the podcast offline. So, if your kids are on the train and they want to open their laptop and do some work, listen to the podcast, they can do that as well. So, I'd definitely check that out. You just search through the Chrome Web Store. There's new stuff in there every day. It just grows every day. But I noticed there's one around sort of flipped classroom here, just talking about, every single student does the home learning part of the activity, but it falls apart because I have to teach the content to the class anyway. So I don't get to be the tutor that I'd like to be. Plus, now at my current school, students and myself have poor internet connection at home, so it's very difficult. What do you say to that, Andrew?
Yeah, that's an issue that a lot of people raise, and I think, in a traditional flipped classroom, this is where I think sometimes the issue comes out. In a traditional flipped classroom, you send the kids home to watch video 1, and then the next day in class, you do some sort of an activity, you have some sort of a discussion, they're doing homework that relates to video 1, and then they go home and watch video 2, and then they come and do the activities that relate to video 2. That I think sometimes does, present problems, because you might, what if a kid doesn't watch the video? What do they do in class then? They can't participate in the activity. So then teachers sort of end up saying, okay, well, we better spend half the class going through the main points that were in the video for the benefit of the ones who didn't listen. And it ends up, then I imagine kids just think, well, what's the point of watching the videos, because I'm going to come to class the next day and the teacher's going to explain it all again anyway. So I think that's a self-defeating way of working. And to me, what works much better is to say, to make you know, if I'm teaching genetics, pedigrees or something, I'm going to make all the videos that I think explain that topic. You know, the things that, I mean, a lot of stuff they can Google for themselves. They don't need me to explain it at all. But there are some things that I think I explain really well that kids at that age will, you know, they'll understand, relate to the examples that I use and the language I use and so on. So things that I feel I need to explain, if I make those things into a video or a podcast or a screencast or something like that, and then all the learning activities are there as well. So then in class, you know, I can just say to my kids then, you know, these are the videos you need to watch. These are the activities you need to do. We need to have a discussion about this. We'll be doing that on Thursday. So by then you need to have done this and this. But it doesn't matter whether you watch video 1 at home. You know, some kids might prefer to do the bookwork at home and watch the videos in class. And to me, you know, a traditional flipped classroom advocate would say that's not okay, but to me, I think it just makes sense. You know, instead of saying what we have to do at home and what we have to do in the classroom, we can now do pretty much anything, anywhere, as it suits us. So I think giving kids that sort of flexibility is not necessarily a bad thing. And then of course you get over the problem of turning up on Tuesday and finding that half the kids didn't watch the video that you set for them for Monday night. It doesn't matter, they can watch that on Tuesday, but they'll have to do some other work at home instead, and you know, different kids will operate differently that way. It also then caters for the kids who don't have internet at home, for example, too, because they can, the things that require an internet connection, they can do those things at school if that suits them better. Other kids that have internet at home might prefer to do it the other way around. So I think that's, you know, we've got to get away from this idea that one workflow or one size fits everybody, and to me that's the real limitation with that traditional flipped classroom model that some people have, is that you're still saying we want everybody to be doing the same thing at the same time in the same way as everybody else. I think we can be a lot more free than that and give people choices.
I agree, and I think what you're talking about really is sort of student-centered learning, is about putting the student in control a little bit. And is that something that you've sort of encouraged in your class? Like, is podcast the only thing you've done around that, or are you doing other things around sort of the student-centered learning?
Oh no, I mean, like we have kids, you know, writing Wikipedia articles and websites and blogs, and I mean, you know, like there's a lot of things that you can. Again, you know, none of those things our teachers didn't have choices about those kinds of things before, you know, but now, I mean, I think that it's interesting to me when I look at schools because you know, we've embraced technological change, I think, in schools. You know, we've got computers and we've got interactive whiteboards and projectors, and you know, we've responded to the fact that of the technological changes over the last 2 decades. But what we haven't really responded to very well are the social changes that have come in with those technological changes. And to me, that's the biggest one. I mean, this is the first generation of kids since the invention of the printing press who are able to produce content in the same form that they're consuming it. I mean, if you think about it, when we grew up, you know, we could watch TV, but we couldn't be on TV. We could listen to the radio, but we couldn't talk on the radio. You could buy the newspaper and read that, but you couldn't write in the newspaper. You know, there were these blessed people who produced content, and everybody else just sat and watched it. But the kids that we're teaching now, you know, they watch YouTube videos, and they make YouTube videos. They get information from Wikipedia, and they edit Wikipedia pages. They read blogs, they write blogs, they listen to podcasts, they make podcasts, and that I think is really exciting. And teachers should be spinning in our chairs thinking about the possibilities that we have for giving kids authentic audiences and you know, publishing platforms that are the current mediums of the day are easily accessible to students. That hasn't happened to any generation in our lifetime, and I think that's really exciting. So to me, if we're bringing kids together in the classroom and then they're just sitting there and we're standing and talking to them, you know, what a waste of opportunities.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. So, like, talk me through the process. How long do you spend making a podcast? And what's the process? Obviously you record it, then how do you edit it? What apps do you use? How do you? Sure. Can you just run through just a real quick step-by-step on that?
Yep, sure. So for me, I use my Blue Yeti microphone and a pop filter that I bought for $4 from Alan's Music. It sits on front, and I get all my audio set up, and I just test to make sure that that's good. And then personally, I use either Audacity or GarageBand, depending on, you know, what I'm actually trying to do, and either of those is fantastic. So I'll launch that. And normally I will have sat down ahead of time like you would for a class, and I'll make a bit of a mind map or a point form list, an outline of what I want to cover, but I certainly don't script the podcast. And then pretty much I press play and I start explaining the topic, pretty much like the way you would do in the classroom. And initially I used to stop and start and edit it, and I'd record something and think, oh, yeah, that didn't sound very good, and I'll do it again. And then I just thought, you know what, I didn't do that in the classroom, so I'm not going to do it here either. So now these days I pretty much would just click record and I'd just explain the topic and then click stop, and I leave all the ums and the ahs, and when I pause to think about what I'm going to talk about, that all stays in. And personally, I think that actually makes it better. It makes it more authentic and relaxed. It doesn't sound. You can tell if somebody's reading a script. I think it doesn't sound nearly so real. Yeah. So I do that. Then once the podcast, once I've finished recording, then I'll put a jingle in the front, and I'll which you can do in Audacity or GarageBand quite easily, just by drag and drop pretty much. And then and I'll usually put a few other sound effects and things that are appropriate through the podcast. If I've used a particular illustration of racing cars or something, I'll get a sound effect and stick that in there. So all up, if my podcast, let's say the actual recording time of the podcast is an hour, it probably might take me 2 hours by the time I plan it out at the start, set up my microphone, explain what I want to explain, and then go back through and put jingles and sound effects in. Then I upload it to Podomatic, which is really just a simple matter of, well, it's a website really. So you just go to the website, you click upload. It's like uploading a video to YouTube, same kind of deal. Once that's done, that's it really. Then so it's maybe a 2-hour process to get a podcast up online in the iTunes store.
Okay.
So how many people? Stats on that? How many people are downloading and listening? Because there's someone in the doc who says they've listened to many of your podcasts and they really appreciated it. So obviously other teachers are grabbing hold of your content, using it with their teachers, with their students. I'm sure it goes worldwide. So what sort of downloads are you looking at, and what's your reach?
Like at the moment, see, I'm not teaching this year. I'm speaking at schools and conferences and things full time at the moment, and so I haven't been making a podcast this year. But even still, I just left last year's lot up online, and so I'm getting maybe 400 or 500 downloads a day of those.
Wow.
Like when I was actually teaching, I guess I was at that time probably responding more to things that were in the media and all that sort of thing, and so but and actively encouraging the community, and so I was often getting 1,000 downloads a day. Back when I was in the classroom and doing it as my normal part of, which, I mean, it's quite extraordinary when you think about it. Like, don't tell me that kids don't want to learn. They do. I think they just don't want to sit in a classroom on a hard chair on a Friday afternoon and be told what to learn, when to learn, how fast to learn it, from whom to learn it. But when they have a choice of going onto the internet and finding someone that explains it in a way that resonates with them, and they can stop and start and pause and listen for as long as they want, and it's human to want to learn, and I just think that resonates with the way. I mean, these days young people, they don't expect to have to wait for music. They just, you listen to it on demand, and videos you watch on YouTube on demand, and books you download them and read them on demand, and it just, to me, it's consistent with the way that young people expect access to things, and they respond to it with enthusiasm given that opportunity.
Certainly is the future, I think, that's for sure. But yeah, look, it's been really inspiring listening to you, Andrew. I think what you're doing is amazing. And just the sheer volume of time you've been doing it for. I mean, you sort of had this idea before it was mainstream, before all these things came through, and I think you're in a better position than anyone to look at what is working or what's not working. And it's been great just sort of listening to it all, and thank you so much for coming on and talking to us all. It's been eye-opening for me, especially. I think I'm going to run some PD around this just after listening to this. So it's been really good. But cool. What I would like to do, we sort of like to run through what you'd be up to over the next couple of weeks if anyone wants to sort of get in contact. We also have the document going with Andrew's details and Mike and myself in there. I've also changed my Google Plus account which has been a treacherous nightmare that I don't want to relive. But yeah, that link's in there as well if anyone wants to follow me on my new account. But yeah, just if you want to run through what you're up to and people can connect with you if you're going to be in the area, and yeah.
Sure. I'm just looking on my calendar here because it's getting
hectic.
Yeah. So what have we got? So I'm in Nathalia next week, and then St Joseph's out in Ferntree Gully. But those, a lot of those things are sort of. So I often will just go to a school, spend a day with their staff. Depending on what platform they've got, we'll look at various tools. So a lot of schools these days have iPads, and so you can make a pretty awesome podcast or screencast or video podcast using an iPad as well. So often that might be the focus of the day. Other times they might be using Windows PCs, so we'll do that. But usually that's sort of a closed shop. Then on Saturday the 21st, I'm speaking at a conference, a design thinking conference at Swinburne Uni, and then I'm in Sydney on early next week at the High Seas conference. And there's a few more schools in there. There's something. Then early next term, I'm just sort of looking because I do quite a bit of work for critical agendas and CSE and Ivanhoe professional learning, and so those sort of PD delivering organisations, and so I'm just looking. I'm doing so. If anyone was really interested in flipped learning, particularly on the 18th of August, I'm doing a flipped learning, a day of professional development around flipped learning for Ivanhoe for professional learning. That's on the 18th of August. That's at Darebin Arts and Entertainment Centre. And on the there's one for critical agendas around about the same time, I think, too. Yeah, there it is. It's actually the 25th of the previous month, so it's the 25th of July for critical agendas, and that's at Clifton's in Melbourne, right in Collins Street in Melbourne. And those, if people wanted to go to those, you can just book those via. I don't do any of the booking or anything. So critical agendas or Ivanhoe professional learning, they manage all of that sort of thing. I just turn up on the day and do my thing and show people cool tools and workflows that. Because sometimes it's not even the tools. Like the tools are one thing, but I think there's a lot of technique involved in making it. You can hear some people make podcasts and they're really boring, and kids don't want to listen to them. So there's no magic in a podcast. If you make a boring podcast, kids won't like that any more than they'll like a boring lesson in the classroom. So I think there are certainly techniques and strategies, and so we spend time looking at those sorts of things as well as just the technology and the websites to use. So. And then, of course, we also consider what you do in the classroom with all that time you free up. That's to me, because in a lot of ways that's the exciting part of the flipped classroom model. We tend to think about all the gadgets and the tools and the websites, but in reality, what's really exciting is that if you take a lot of what we used to do in the classroom out of the classroom, now you've got all this class time to reallocate to something more important, and that I think is when things get really exciting. So that gives you a bit of an idea. And if anyone wanted, if anyone wanted a more detailed list of where I'll be, and especially for those sort of ones that are open to the public, they can feel free to shoot me an email or a tweet, and I'll certainly reply to that.
That's great. So yeah, your details are in that doc. So if you want to go to that and check it out, guys, they're more than welcome to do that. So that just in case you've missed it at the beginning, it's bit.ly. And then UTBS, so UTBS, all lowercase, 01. That will take you through to that doc that we're talking about that has all our details in it, which is great. I'm just, in case people want to catch me, I'm going to be in New Zealand for the next 2 weeks. So in Auckland, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then in Wellington, Thursday, Friday, Christchurch on Monday, and then Queenstown, Tuesday, Wednesday. So that's obviously in the next couple of weeks, and obviously these are evergreen and people might hit this a little bit later and you might obviously miss out, but if you want to catch up on that, then shoot me an email at that email address in the document, and we'll tell you. I think Auckland is pretty much booked out, but there's a little bit of space in Wellington, Christchurch and Queenstown. So yeah, New Zealand teachers, if you want to get in on that, we're going to do a one-day Google Apps Discovery Day and a one-day masterclass. So if you want to get in on that, that would be fantastic. Keep an eye out for an email from me. We're just in the process of changing from Teachers Training International across to usingtechnologybetter.com. That's just being designed up by, and I don't know, I've just given it to a team of coders to do, so they're going to put that site up in the next, hopefully the next 3 or 4 days it should be live. So keep an eye out for that. And next fortnight, we're going to bring on a few different trainers who are doing some great things from all around Australia. And we've got some pretty exciting announcements to make next fortnight. So make sure you stick around for that and be a part of that one, because we've got some good stuff we've got planned for you and coming up. So Andrew and Blake, just want to thank you for being a part of today. It's been a great, Andrew, I really appreciate your passion. And a lot of what you said has really resonated with me in terms of how students should think and work and how teachers can relate to students. And honestly, I mean, this could have gone on for hours and I would have just been more than happy to sit and listen. So I think maybe we should try and get you back on for a round 2 later on in the year.
That'd be great, Mike. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. And once again, everyone, thanks for watching, and we appreciate you being a part of the community. I'm going to hang around and just answer some questions in that Google Doc for a few minutes. So if you've got any last-minute questions, throw them into that doc, and I'll make sure that I answer them. And we'll also send you out an email. Yeah, cool. So yeah, we'll send you out an email with all the show notes, the recordings, the audio, the transcript, and all of that. So have a great evening, everyone, and we'll see you in a fortnight's time.
See ya.
Cool.